Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished and senior professional from Minnesota, USA, Mr. Chris Walton. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Chris is the co-chief executive officer of Omni Talk, which is a retail blog for retailers by retailers. Chris is the leading expert and influencer in omnichannel retailing. He's worked with Target and Gap, and he's from the Harvard Business School. So, Chris, let me start by asking you that, you've had quite an amazing journey. Tell me about some of your key milestones.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Let's see. So if I look back at my whole life, the first major milestone for me in my life was actually my father died on a commercial airline disaster in 1987. Mm-hmm. And so I was 10 years old at that time. So that gives you an idea how old I am to the date. Mm-hmm. That was really challenging for me, but just, had to pick myself up from that and learned a lot from that experience for sure. It still shapes me to this day. And then from there, my career, I had good schooling. I went to Stanford and Harvard. And after Stanford, I worked for the Gap out in San Francisco back in the late 90s when the Gap was the biggest thing in retail, really, at that point in the United States. And I got to see the height of the Gap, the khaki swing craze, for those that might remember that, to really the fall of the Gap in the early 2000s too. The dot-com bubble burst, and then everything just started falling from there. And Gap's really never been the same again. And then went to business school. And then after business school, I linked up with Target. And Target was a great experience for me. I had always wanted to be a merchant, and I at Gap I'd been in inventory planning and allocation. And with your retail background, you'll know exactly what that is. But I wanted to be a merchant, so I did. And I took my first job in Target. I was the buyer of seasonal bath and rugs, which is a really kitschy sounding job. It's like things like pumpkin shaped doormats and Santa Claus hand towels. I always joke that it's my grandmother's favorite job that I ever had. But then, I ended up doing a ton of different things at Target. I think over my 20-year career in retail, I think I've touched almost everything. The only thing I haven't done is really hardcore software engineering at this point, but was a merchant. I actually went into the field and ran stores for Target for a couple of years. I was a executive VP in .com as well. And then finished out my career heading up a project called the Store of the Future, which was a pretty seminal moment for me. I spent 2 years designing Target's future operation for scale. And the entire time I was asked to answer the question 5 to 10 years out, why are people still coming to physical stores to shop? And it was a great project. And so I got inundated with, what works and what doesn't when you start talking about future technology and future experience design at scale. And so that probably leads me to my next moment. So then in 2017, that project ended. And at the time I was like, I don't really want to go back and do a traditional mainline job at Target. I don't want to be an executive merchant. And so I decided to go out on my own and form Omni Talk, which, as you said, is we call it the retail media company that's for retailers by retailers. And by that, we mean the impetus for us starting it was we thought there was a lot of noise in the media about how retail was changing and what technology mattered. And as we clicked into it, what we found was a lot of that was just either things regurgitated by companies trying to drive up PR, or things put out by journalists who, quite honestly, don't have that much retail experience. And so they're a lot of times just regurgitating what they hear. And so we thought there was a unique position to come in and provide a really frank and candid point of view on what matters and what doesn't for the retail executive that's trying to make decisions in their job day in and day out.
Wow.
And so,
what an amazing journey. But
it was great.
Yeah. But, now, Chris, let's talk retail now, I spent 16 years of my life in retail, in small format retail as a pharmacy. So when you set up Omni Talk, what were your objectives?
Yeah, it's funny. That's a great question. I'd love to say it was more planned out than it was, but initially we had thought, my business partner and I, Anne Mezzenga, who started the company with me and who I'd met at Target, we thought we'd be retail consultants. And so at the time I started writing and created a website just to help us build our brand. And what I found was I was writing, my first article was comparing Amazon to the Vietnam War, believe it or not. Very, very unique point of view, very unique writing style. What I found was people were reading it. And then we got into podcasting later on. And what we found is we didn't really want to be consultants because we didn't want to travel. We like doing the work too, versus like telling people how to do the work. And we found that we could consult in a different way, which was by putting our own thoughts and education out in the marketplace by way of the content we produced. And lo and behold, as we started experimenting with it and got more traction with the articles and the podcast, we found that there was a demand for it, and that we had a fledgling media company that was starting to grow in 2017, 2018. And now it's almost six, I think it's our 6th year of doing this, give or take. And it's been very successful. And we've got a full-fledged media business now at this point.
Amazing. So let me start by asking a very basic question. What are some of the major challenges a lot of the brick and mortar retail outlets are facing today?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny. This year, it's pretty straightforward. Relative to other years, it's been a little more difficult to answer, but I think there's a number of them. I think number one, the thing I'm hearing most about is really staffing. Staffing in the faces of labor shortages, as well as in a climate of rising wage rates as well. That's probably the number one things on retailers' mind, or the number one thing on retailers' mind. Of course, you have inflation sitting there in the background, which is something people are considering. The other two things I would say are inventory availability, particularly inventory availability at shelf. It seems like the supply chain has balanced, but where the placement of that inventory is and how you optimize it is still something retailers are trying to grapple with, especially in this day and age of all the omni-channel fulfillment capabilities, like ship from store, buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, things like that. And then the last one I'd say too, that's starting to bubble up a lot more, particularly in the last few months, is the issue around theft. More and more CFOs are focused on that, and CEOs as well. Part of that goes with the inventory availability too, having visibility to what inventory is actually on your shelf. Those are becoming issues for retailers. And so those are really the 4 areas I think, for the most part, retail in general is going to be focused on here in 2023.
Amazing. So let me then take up the first one that you mentioned, which is people staffing. What goes into building and retaining a great team of people in a retail company?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, going back to my store management days when, you had 150 people working under you and you're running a building, or even as an executive at Target with the same amount of people. For me, the thing I always went back to were 3 words: complexity, autonomy, and attachment. Those are the 3. And I think I read that somewhere at some point in my education as well. But I think it really matters. Like, by complexity, I mean, like, can you make the job interesting for people? And that interest level can be created many different ways for many different types of people. What makes one thing complex for someone or interesting for someone, for you or me, is different. But you can tap into that. And then probably the piece to me that's most important is the autonomy. Is once they find their job interesting, are you allowing them to do it? Are you allowing them to grow in their role, to make decisions on their own? Everyone's had it. No one likes the boss that's standing over their shoulder, making their decisions for them. That's just not a fun environment. And so when you get that breed of those 2 things together, then I think the attachment comes into play. You can't have the attachment without those 2 things.
Correct.
And that's what's important, because then you get people passionate, you get people excited, you get people wanting to come to work and feeling like they're contributing to something. And so those, for me, are always the 3 ingredients that I'm kind of, when I'm working with people and managing people, I'm trying to assess, how am I feeling about this person along those 3 dimensions? And generally speaking, I think it's worked out pretty well.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And over the last, 2 decades, how have you seen consumer preferences change when it comes to retail?
Yeah. So for me, I'd say, everything in retail, I'm curious what you think too, but everything in retail always seems to migrate towards the lowest price and the most convenient option. I think that's just a universal truth. So I don't think, to answer your question specifically, I don't think anything has really changed. I think what we've just seen is that the convenience side of retail has evolved so much because of the dawn of digital and e-commerce. And the pandemic has also accelerated that too, in terms of what convenience means for each individual person is now more unique. Getting an order shipped to your house may be convenient for some, but not for others. And, for that reason, you might want to go to the store and pick it up. But that's really, the convenience element is what's really shaping everything for the most part, in my mind. Price is out there, but it's not as big of a factor as it was when Walmart was, coming on the scene and bursting on the scene, back, in the 80s or early 90s. Amazon's changed the convenience game for the most part.
Well said.
at least in the States.
Absolutely. Which then takes me to the next logical question, that how is e-commerce impacting the brick and mortar retail stores? And what do you see as the way forward? Because
Yeah, I mean,
just to interrupt you for a minute, I was in the US in July, August, and virtually, most of the big brands that I went to in the garment business seem to just go to the website and buy online.
Right. Probably because they didn't have the inventory in stock, right? Like we said in the very beginning, right? That's one of the main issues they're dealing with. Yeah, I mean, to extend off the question we just said, or to the answer I just gave you to the previous question, convenience is changing everything. So I think when you look at the brick and mortar operation itself, there's really three elements that I think are going to change here, over the next 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 year horizon, which is number one, the back rooms are going to change. The architectures are going to change. You're already seeing that too in the new stores that are being planned, particularly with the bigger guys like Target and Sam's Club, for example, over here in the States have already announced that they're going to do much larger stores with much larger back rooms. And the reason for that is because their stores are closer to the consumer from a last mile perspective. So they want the last mile savings, but they also want the efficiency of picking and packing out of their stores, which they don't have right now, given how they're currently architected. So any new store you see built is likely going to have a bigger backroom operation. That's number one. The second thing, and this is particularly impactful to the quick serve restaurant industry, as well as all of retail, is the parking lots are going to change. You see a lot of innovation in the parking lot in terms of the number of spaces that are designated for pickup, the number of other innovations alongside of that help with curbside pickup. You're already seeing lockers come into play. You're seeing things like mobile lockers that will take your order from the store out to the car. All of that is, a further element of the convenience argument I was making before. And then last thing I would say, you're going to see a lot of changes with how we check out of a retail store. And that's going to take a lot of forms. It could be scan and go payment. It could be computer vision systems like the Amazon. I don't know if you've been in an Amazon Go, just walk out store where you just, scan your barcode to walk in the store like you're getting on an airplane, just take whatever you want off the shelf and walk out. That's going to continue to happen. And it's all for that reason, again, is we want speed. We want convenience in our experiences. We don't want to wait for anything. We're used to just, one click buying on Amazon. We want that same experience in store. So you're going to see a lot of innovation heading in that direction as well. So those are the three areas I think that you'll see retail change the most.
And do you see robotics coming in? Do you see last mile delivery using drones?
I'll take the first part of that question first, and then hit the second part next. But yes, you'll definitively see more robotics in the warehousing operations over time. You already have them in the big distribution centers for the most part, but you'll start to see that as the retailers get an understanding of how big they want their back rooms to be, and then can staff to the new processes around those back rooms. The third order condition is automation. But so we're still probably 5 to 10 years out from seeing that in the store level itself, but it will happen. You'll also see it somewhat in the in-store operations. You have some grocery stores out here like Schnucks Market in St. Louis that uses robotics to scan the inventory on shelves for availability, make sure the prices are correct as well. So I think you'll start to see that more too, because there's a lot of positive use cases for doing that. But it's probably limited into like the grocery environment, for example. Your next question, drones. No, I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. It just doesn't make sense because it's one-to-one delivery. When have we ever had that work efficiently versus one-to-many delivery? And then the fact that you'd have to have so many things going in the sky and controlled by the FAA, that's why we do what we do, is to dispel the focus that gets put on those types of stories.
Wonderful. My next question to you is relating to the pandemic and work from home. Now, in India, what has happened with retail is that Amazon and Flipkart, which is owned by Walmart, have actually started to deliver within a few hours. And some chains, multi-billion-dollar valuation chains, have even gone to the extent of saying, you want 4 tomatoes, we'll deliver it to you in 15 minutes. So that's one-to-one delivery for you. I want to get your perspective on how has work from home impacted retail?
Yeah, I mean, for me, work from home has impacted it. It's pushed the edge of the convenience argument again. I think when I hear you describe what you said is, and this is what the US is trying to figure out. I think every country's trying to figure out is like, where's the breaking point on how fast we need everything, right? Like, is the majority need it like 15 minutes, or is like 1 to 2 hours enough, or is even same day enough, or 4 hours enough? I don't think any of us know that in the industry. I don't even think any of us as consumers know it, or how much we're willing to pay for it, right? Too, because it's also highly disadvantageous from an economic perspective, depending on how you want to do that from the standpoint of the retailer. So I think we're trying to figure that all out. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, what the work from home has done is it's just changed our perception of what convenience means. And we're now in this experimentation petri dish of trying to figure out what options work best in mass as retailers for the brand that you have and the consumers that you service.
Yeah, interesting. The other perspective I want to get from you, Chris, was this, huge rush or huge conversation about the metaverse.
Yeah.
And the metaverse seems to be, what's exciting retailers the most. And I was reading companies like Nike are buying real estate on the metaverse.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the metaverse and how will it work?
That's a great question too. The metaverse was, I would say from the US perspective, at least as I'm reading the tea leaves, the metaverse was really cool, really hip last year around this time. And I would say in the last 3 to 4 months, it's really lost its luster. You have examples like you shared of companies like Nike or even Starbucks experimenting with NFTs in the space. Yep. But in some ways, that's not like true metaverse either, where you're talking about living in a virtual reality world. You've got the goggles on your head and all that. And so there are so many bridges that we still need to cross for the metaverse to become a palpable way that will impact commerce on a grand scale, particularly hardware adoption, which if you look at Meta's last figures, like their hardware usage rates are going down, and they're the most advanced here. So it tells me that it's something that retailers should be looking at, but they should be looking at it very experimentally, not devoting a lot of money to it at this point, and really focused on the core things that drive the business. Like I said before, like staffing, inflation, supply chain availability, and combating theft. Like if someone told me I'm going to prioritize metaverse against those four, I think they'd be in trouble if I was running the place.
You're right. Get back to the real world problems for the time being, isn't it?
Right. And I'm a guy that focuses on innovation too. So it's hard for me to say that in my job because I like talking about those types of things, but it just doesn't make sense right now in my opinion or in our opinion.
Correct. In fact, I was speaking to one of the metaverse gurus in the US, and I asked him a question. I said, so do you think next year I can have my podcast conversations, my avatar with Chris Walton's avatar sitting on Mars in a coffee shop? And it's the next year you should be able to do it. So
yeah, I actually saw somebody do that, but then I was kind of like, well, but why would I want to do that versus just see you, right? Like we're doing right now. It just seems so much better. Like I don't know. I just don't understand that, but maybe some people will.
I agree. So moving on now, Chris, I've got time for a couple of more questions.
Yeah.
Today's young shoppers are completely dependent on reviews. And retail seems to be being driven by reviews. Young people are not even stepping out unless they have checked reviews. How are retailers managing thousands and thousands and thousands of reviews? Because that's become such a powerful, feedback mechanism for them.
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind for me on that. I think while the reviews are important, I think somewhat the importance of it has shifted towards the influencer as well. The influencer being the default reviewer for the consumer as well. So I think you're seeing more retailers shift their resources to aligning with the right influencers or the right positioning of their content on social media, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, what have you. So that's kind of the next evolution of the review. As far as the second part, I say, like, as far as reviews in and of themselves, they've always been important. I haven't seen a lot of trends in terms of retailers capitalizing on them in the traditional way that we talk about, like them being online and available on a product detail page or whatnot. The only thing I've seen really is like retailers trying to sort through the fake reviews versus the good reviews to make sure the customers understand which of those are the best. But other than that, I mean, I think those are the real main moves I've seen in terms of the retail industry trying to capitalize or still make the review process better for the consumer at the end of the day.
Interesting. And one more question for you.
Yeah.
And this is relating to the branding and marketing. You know, 4 decades ago, when I started my career, everything was different. But now marketing branding is all being driven by digital marketing, small phone, communication in 7 seconds, 10 seconds. How are retailers adapting to a lot of these changes? Because retailers need to be able to talk. And I remember there used to be full page ads and there used to be coupons and whatever else.
Yeah.
How is all that changing?
That's the $64,000 question right there. You know, and it's really tough because, like, you know, I mean, I age myself. I'm about to turn 46 here. You know, it's a tough
I'm
world.
only 2 decades older than you.
Only 2. Yeah, I didn't want to place you. I didn't want to guess. So thanks for jumping in there. But it's a really hard challenge for the average retail executive because our minds, we just don't have the neuroplasticity that, you know, the young generation has to adapt to all these different technologies. And so, you know, I think the only thing you can say is that they're real. You have to understand that's the other part too that's important, which I think we touched on a little bit. You have to understand the importance of them. As cool and as flashy as they can be, there's a right way to, you know, walk, crawl, run towards them if you do it smartly. But dismissing them, I think in general, is never a good thing. And you see a lot of executives do that just because of the neuroplasticity. Like they just don't want to get their minds around it. And therefore they don't focus on it. And then you don't really see the impact in the short term, but 5 to 10 years later, you start to see it with the retailers that have dismissed it. Whereas you look at retailers that have always embraced innovation, like a Sam's Club, a Walmart in the last 5 years is another great example, and Amazon, you know, they're always out of front of the curve.
Well said. And on that note, Chris, thank you for this amazing conversation. Thank you for talking to me about your personal journey, about what got you into some of the biggest retail chains in the US. Thank you for talking to me about Omni Talk. If people want to review or read what you're writing, do they look for just your Omni Talk blog or LinkedIn?
Yeah, they can go to omnitalk.blog or they can follow Omni Talk Retail on LinkedIn as well. Either of those places is great for us.
Okay, so I'm going to check out, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Chris's blog. Thank you also for talking to me at such length about the different aspects of the evolution of retail and what you see for the future. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.